Okay, this is academic hero number 7, Arthur Schopenhauer. Where this came from was I had written a book called Straight A at Stanford on to Harvard, which is largely about academics and study skills, a little bit autobiographical, and I showed it to some friends of mine, and these guys were lawyer buddies who, they write for a living. They're pretty good at it, whereas a doctor thinks they write a lot, but doctor writing is more, it's really pretty lousy, okay? You just want to summarize in a pretty standardized format. So the bottom line was I thought I knew what I was doing, but they found tons of problems in how I wrote. I was embarrassed about it. All their criticisms were correct. So because of that, I decided to learn how to really write well. And, I had gotten an A in my writing class at Stanford, but you know what? That doesn't really mean anything. That's almost like house training to just get you to follow some rules. Usually a lot of strunk and white, So anyways, studying Schopenhauer really helped me a lot to understand writing better. So if you're interested in learning how to write well, Schopenhauer is good for that. He was kind of a lonely, pessimistic, crazy old guy, but he was also a genius. Some of his favorite books were Tristram Shandy by Lawrence Stern. That's a crazy book where almost the entire book is he's writing about what happened before he was born, and that's his autobiography. So it's a crazy book, but it's very clever and funny. Schopenhauer could read in multiple languages: German, Latin, Greek, English, French, and Spanish. He loved Don Quixote, which also is very funny, but kind of a crazy book. Let's see. Schopenhauer, he had money by inheritance, so he was lucky. He could just do his philosophy, which he wanted to do. And it was also interesting that he was like the smartest guy in his entire country, but he couldn't get a job in philosophy because other people didn't like him. He thought that men tend to get intellect from their mothers and character from their fathers. And I wondered, why my kids seem a little bit more like their mother than like me? Why can't they be more like me? Then I realized that they get the zygote. In the zygote, the DNA for fertilization from the mama, it does get chromosomes from mom and dad, but it also gets from the mother the plasma membrane of the egg, the cytoplasm, the mitochondria from the mother. And when I first thought of this, I was a little sad in the sense that, why can't my kids get 50-50 from me or more from me? Then I realized that if the mother provides 2/3 of a kid's genetic material, then she really ought to be responsible for more than 2/3 of the kid's expenses. Anyways, back to Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer said, "A happy life is impossible. The highest a man can achieve is a heroic life." And that's actually a real clever statement because Schopenhauer, by the way, lived from 1788 to 1860. It's real clever because if you seek happiness, you probably won't be too happy. You'll always be second-guessing yourself and other people. Versus if you just try to do something you think is good and useful along the way, you'll probably be happy. Schopenhauer continues, "It is only in old age that intellectual men attain their sublime expression." Yeah, that's the nice thing about intellectual is that, let's say your big thing is sports. Well, sports tend to fade as you get older versus the intellect continues to grow. As long as you got good blood perfusion to your brain, a lot of people are mentally sharp in their 80s and even in their 90s. Schopenhauer continues, "Of all the intellectual faculties, judgment is the last to mature." Yes, that's true. That's why older doctors are better. They just got a lot more experience once they reach their 50s compared to some young guy might be hot stuff at reading an EKG in his 30s, but he just doesn't have the clinical experience that an older doc has. Schopenhauer continues, "A man who has not enough originality to think out a new title for a book will be much less capable of giving it new contents." That is true. I mean, basically, you could look at a book, and if the author hasn't said something clever or made you laugh by the bottom of the first page, they're probably never going to, okay? And the really good writers, I've noticed, there's something funny typically about the table of contents, and there's some surprise in the book. Whereas, I start getting a little worried when I see all this front matter just wasting your time before you get to the good stuff in the book. That's a bad sign. Okay, Schopenhauer continues, True brevity consists in saying only what is worth saying while avoiding all else that everyone can think for themselves." Yeah, that's a good writer when they let you do a lot of the thinking on your own. Okay, Schopenhauer continues, "To use many words to communicate few thoughts is the unmistakable sign of mediocrity. To gather much thought into a few words stamps the man of genius. Yeah, that's true. Somebody who's really got their act together, they know how to say just what needs to be said. I used to like it, back when I was a young resident in training. The best attendings, they could summarize the entire clinical story in about 2 or 3 sentences. You'd have the medical student writing a 3-page history and physical, and then, some really good attending would just summarize it in 3 lines, and those 3 lines would be perfect. Okay, Schopenhauer. The task is to think what nobody has yet thought about that which everybody sees. Schopenhauer. Only he who writes entirely for the sake of what he has to say writes anything worth writing. The greatest works of the greatest men all belong to a time when they had to write them for nothing or a very small amount. The best writers are those who have thought before they started writing. They are rare. Okay, that's a good point. Most books suck. If you spend time reading a lot, you'll notice that so many books, you get all this fluff right in the beginning. When the author starts giving you fluff at the beginning, bad sign. Toss the book, because it's never going to get better. That usually means it's an advertisement for something, or they really only have 1 or 2 pages of contents and they need to fluff it out into 300 pages. Waste of time. Okay, Schopenhauer continues. He who writes for fools will always find a large audience, unquote. And that is true. You notice if somebody gets up there and says, olive oil is heart healthy, they'll have 100,000 views on a video. Or somebody, tells you not to go with olive oil, they'll have only a few hundred. It's the same thing with writing books. So the piece of crap that you'll see in a store, at the airport to buy to read for the general public, those books always suck. They're always worthless, waste of time, and predictable. Versus something good, it'll probably barely anyone knows about it. I had that experience when I read medical physiology books. The best books are always written by some old person getting ready to retire who puts it all together. All these multi-author books, they almost always suck. Okay, Schopenhauer continues. It only takes a few pages to see the author's skill and intention. If the author does not quickly display some valuable information and only seems to be writing to fill up the page with words, then quickly throw the book into the garbage because your time is too valuable to waste. Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer continues. A great writer writes because he has something to say. He does not write for fame or money because he knows he will not get any. He writes for great men and for posterity because too few of his contemporaries will be able to follow his thoughts. He is like a man who knows the correct time, but it is of no use to him because everyone else is using a different clock. He plans his book like an architect plans a building. He has really thought about the topic. He has conversed about the topic. He writes about his own thoughts and his own experience. He expresses in a fresh and forcible way. Simplicity has always been held as a mark of truth. It is also a mark of genius. Arthur Schopenhauer. Yeah, that's totally true. The great writers, the great scientists, they write in a clear story. The great scientists, they put their papers and their ideas into a narrative form, whereas when you read the typical crappy science papers, full of statistics and full of citations, but there's hardly any coherent logic or thought or story in it, and it's really difficult to read and you don't get much out of it. And also, I like what he says. It's true. Lots of these great books, nobody knows they even exist. I've had that experience when I discover great pathophysiology books. So that's also why I wrote mine. I said, well, I'd love to have an audience, but if I can't have it, fine. And I wrote my books to make my doctor buddies laugh because, it's a good audience. Anyways, the object of science is to recognize the many in the one, to perceive the rules in any given example, and not to go counting up facts ad infinitum. Right, to sense what is the key point. Schopenhauer continues, since then, similes and metaphors are such a powerful engine of knowledge, it is a sign of great intelligence in a writer if his similes are unusual and at the same time to the point. Schopenhauer. A good work is doubly good if it is short. Yeah, so you're thankful when an author is able to get to the point so they don't go on and on. Okay, Schopenhauer now talking about when countries decided to use their own language for writing books rather than writing in Latin, and he thought this was a disaster because no longer would there be different people from different countries able to communicate with each other. So here he goes. True abolition of Latin as universal language of learned men, together with the rise of provincialism, which attaches to the national literatures, has been a great misfortune for the cause of knowledge in Europe. for it was chiefly through the medium of the Latin language that a learned public existed at all in Europe, a public to which every book as it came out was directly appealed. The number of minds in the whole of Europe that are capable of thinking and judging is small as it is. But when that audience is broken up and severed by differences of language, then the good these minds can do is very much weakened. This is a great disadvantage, but a second and worse one will follow, namely that the ancient languages will cease to be taught at all. The neglect of them is rapidly gaining ground both in France and in Germany. If it should really come to this, then, farewell humanity, farewell noble taste and high thinking. The age of barbarism will return in spite of the railways, the telegraphs, and the balloons. We shall thus in the end lose one more advantage possessed by all our ancestors, for Latin is not only a key to the knowledge of Roman antiquity, it also directly opens up to us the Middle Ages in every country in Europe, and modern times as well, down to about 1750. The best recreation for the mind is to study the ancient classics. So Schopenhauer had a point. It was difficult for people to communicate. One of the good things about, modern English being so dominant is one can read scientific papers from other countries. That's good. On the other hand, though, it leads a generalized, generic culture, which often is not good, going to other places. And diet is not good. Anyways, Schopenhauer continues. The thing treated can be important, whoever wrote it. The form, the peculiar character of a book depends upon the person who wrote it. It is the way in which matters are treated, what is thought about them, that gives the book its value, and this comes from the author. If a book is excellent and beyond comparison, so is its author. Where the matter is accessible to everyone, then everything will depend on the form of the book. What is thought about the matter will give the book all the value it possesses. Here only a really distinguished man will be able to produce anything worth reading, for others will think nothing but what anyone else can think. A good author is fertile in his ideas. He truly has something to say. While a man should, if possible, think like a great genius, he should talk the same language as everyone else. Only when a man is convinced of the truth and the importance of his thoughts will he feel the enthusiasm necessary for an untiring effort to find the clearest, finest, and strongest expression of them. Schopenhauer. So what I like about all that is what Schopenhauer is basically saying is, just like you would plan to build a great building, to build a great cathedral, to make a beautiful painting, to do some other work of creativity or art, a book should be carefully planned. It should not be rushed off for money. It should be done because the author really has something to say. And that's actually rare with books. You'd be surprised. Tons of books are written because they're trying to promote a product, or the author is trying to get promoted at work, or trying to make something to put on their resume. And it becomes usually obvious pretty quick when that's the case. If they're trying to really share something great that they think is cool, like when Jack Delatorre wrote his book, Alzheimer's Turning Point, it was because his research had been neglected all his life, and he just wanted to have it all put together in coherent form. He's an old guy, okay? But that's a brilliant, absolutely brilliant book. Jack Delatorre's Alzheimer's Turning Point. Okay, next quote by Schopenhauer. Exaggeration of every kind is essential to dramatic art. Yeah, that's true. They got to make it interesting. To make something interesting, you got to put it into a story form, and you have to make it emotional. Otherwise, people won't be interested in it. Schopenhauer continues. Students and learned persons of all sorts and every age aim as a rule at acquiring information rather than insight. Information is only a means of insight and of little value in itself. Yep, that's true. Schopenhauer continues, true excellence can be attained only where the work has been produced for its own sake alone. The truth is that the hobbyist treats his subject as an end, whereas the professional treats it merely as a means. The hobbyist is really in earnest about a matter and has a direct interest because he likes it and pursues it con amore. It is these hobbyists and not professional hirelings that have always done the greatest work, Schopenhauer. And that's true too. That's why textbooks will have 20 different authors, a different author for every chapter. They're always kind of incoherent. It doesn't all fit together. But when a single author, or sometimes two authors, work together to make a book, they can make something creative. It holds together. It's coherent. Schopenhauer continues, the intellectual attainments of a man who thinks for himself resemble a fine painting, where the light and shade are correct, the tones sustained, the color perfectly harmonized. It is true to life. On the other hand, the intellectual attainments of a mere man of learning are like a large palette full of all sorts of colors, which at most are systematically arranged, but are devoid of harmony, connection, and meaning. To think with one's own head is to aim at developing a coherent whole, a system, even though it be not a strictly complete one. The really scientific thinker, although he has need of knowledge, and so must read a great deal, his mind is strong enough to master it all, to assimilate and incorporate it with the system of his thoughts, and to make it fit with the organic unity of his insight, which, though vast, is always growing. The thinker stands in the same relation to the book philosopher as an eyewitness does to the historian. The thinker speaks from direct knowledge of his own. The thinker is like the man who has traveled to the other place and lived there for some time, rather than the book scholar who has only read travel guides about it. The man who thinks for himself can easily be distinguished from the book philosopher by the way he talks, by his marked earnestness and the originality, directness, and personal conviction that stamp all his thoughts and expressions. The book philosopher lets it be seen that everything he has is second-hand. The works of all truly capable minds are distinguished by a character of decision and definiteness, which means that they are clear. A truly capable mind always knows what it wants to express. The characteristic sign of a mind of the highest order is that it always judges at first hand. Arthur Schopenhauer. So yeah, I mean, that's great. What he's basically saying is a guy who's trying to tell you something important or useful, he's going to tell you directly, versus somebody who's just going through the motions to get a publications. They're always talking in euphemisms and running all over the place. I know this is kind of long, but it's hard to find all this material, and Schopenhauer is great, man. He really helps you figure out how do you put together something that's quality work. Okay, Schopenhauer continues. The growth of ideas rests at bottom upon simile, because ideas arise by a process of combining the similarities and neglecting the differences between things. Intelligence, in the strict sense of the word, ultimately consists in a seizing of relations between things, and a clear and pure grasp of relations is all the more often attained when the comparison is made between cases that lie wide apart from one another and between things of a different nature. As long as a relation is known to me, existing only in a single case, I have but an individual idea of it. In other words, only an intuitive knowledge of it. But as soon as I see the same relation in two different cases, I have a general idea of its whole nature, and this is a deeper and more perfect knowledge. Since then, similes and metaphors are such a powerful engine of knowledge, it is a sign of great intelligence in a writer if his similes are unusual and at the same time to the point. Aristotle also observes that by far the most important thing to a writer is to have the power of metaphor, for it is a gift which cannot be taught, and it is a mark of genius. Okay, we're almost done here. I love the Schopenhauer stuff. That's why I'm going on. You know, he was a crazy old guy, but he was brilliant about development of cognitive performance for writing. Okay, Schopenhauer continues. Genius can be defined as an exceptionally clear consciousness of things, and therefore also of their antithesis and of one's own self. If you want to earn the gratitude of your own age, you must keep in step with it. Okay, we already did that one. Okay, we're almost done here. Schopenhauer continues. What light is to the outer physical world, intellect is to the inner world of consciousness. Only where intellect exceeds the measure needed does knowledge become an end in itself. It is consequently quite abnormal if a man's intellect should desert its natural vocation, that of serving the will, and instead perceives where the will only perceives mere relations between things, in order that the intellect will occupy itself purely objectively. But it is precisely this which is the origin of art, poetry, and philosophy, which are therefore produced by an organ not originally intended for that purpose. For intellect is fundamentally a hard-working factory hand, whom his demanding master, the will, keeps busy from morn to night. But if this hard-driven serf should happen to do some of his work voluntarily, during his free time, on his own initiative and without any object but the work itself, simply for his own satisfaction, then this is a genuine work of art. Indeed, if pushed to the maximum, a work of genius. Such a purely objective employment of the intellect, as well as creating all artistic, poetical, and philosophical achievements of the higher kind, it also creates all purely scientific achievement in general, Arthur Schopenhauer. And that's one of the things I love about Schopenhauer, because he's basically talking about somebody like Isaac Newton, who just wanted to understand gravity and optics, and he just pursued them in search of the truth. And, with no money, sitting around in his bedroom doing experiments, he created these incredible scientific achievements, okay? Whereas when you got all these modern professors just begging for grant money and trying to please the person handing out the grant money, $100 billion and you get nothing. Okay, continuing with Schopenhauer. Talent works for money and fame. The motive which moves genius to productivity is, on the other hand, less easy to determine. It isn't money that a genius works for, because he seldom gets any. It isn't for fame, because fame is too uncertain. It is rather an instinct of a unique sort of virtue, whereby the genius is impelled to express what he knows in enduring works without being conscious of any additional motivation. It takes place, by and large, with the same sort of necessity as a tree brings forth fruit. I like that. So the genius has, this is Schopenhauer continuing, the genius has a gift of greater clarity of thought and knowledge that he wishes to give to the whole species. And it is this that impels the genius to labor in solitude and to complete its work. So that's Arthur Schopenhauer. He lived from 1788 to 1860. Hope that was helpful.